And the S&P 500 has outperformed anything over time, always, right?
Always. Like all fund managers who say and gloat about themselves and say they can beat the market, they don't. Nobody beats the market. So just go with the market. And by the way, if one of those stocks in the S&P 500 doesn't perform really well, they get kicked out of the index.
Hello, Heal Squad. Welcome back. We have a big episode for you today. Today we are going to be making money. Money moves as we focus on our financial health today. First, we'll start with our quote of the day. Time is the only thing you can't buy. I don't think you can buy love either, but we'll leave it at time. That's from Nicole Lapin, our guest today. Heal Squad, you are in for a treat. I know that a lot of us have a lot of fear around money, a lot of trauma around money. And so today, our guest, Nicole, is going to really help us get started. And it's never too late. As she says, you're never younger than you are today. So it's never too late. And we're going to teach you why it's not too late and why you can still do really well for yourself and hopefully make money while you sleep if you follow these easy steps today. So we're gonna simplify it down to make it easy for you guys. Nicole is a New York Times best-selling author of Rich Bitch, Boss Bitch, Becoming Superwoman, and Miss Independent. Lots of books. She's also been an anchor on CNN, CNBC, and Bloomberg. She's the founder of the Money News Network, which is the home of her daily show, Money Rehab with Nicole Lapin, that reached #1 on Apple's business charts. So she has been doing this for a very long time, and she's going to teach us how to get in on investing easily and as safely as you can. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. So, Nicole,
so many books.
So excited for you to be here today. One of my favorite topics to talk about outside of health is money. And I feel like we were chit-chatting before, as we always do, and I was talking about how I talk about health literacy being as important as financial literacy, because I feel like the first thing people will get to is financial literacy. Health literacy you only get to when there's a crisis. But both are so important to have a working foundation and a working knowledge for. And for me, I grew up and money was a discussion in my home. My dad was buying stocks. I bought my first stock in high school. And I knew it was important to get, mutual funds at the time. It was things like that. Like I had a little bit of a base because of my dad. You said that you guys didn't talk about money in your home, which is interesting. What is your background?
So I'm first generation American, never talked about any stocks or bonds or mutual funds. I should have come over to your guys' house.
Where are your parents from?
From Israel.
So, got it.
So, and like a lot of first generation Americans, you only use cash for the most part. And, not talking about debt.
Is cash bad? I like paying cash and being debt free.
I mean, I like saying cash is queen because we say king for everything.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's just money is a tool like anything else. You can use it to build a house or to tear it down like a hammer, right? It's just how you use it that matters most. Money without meaning is just paper. So it's really the meaning that you assign to it and how you use it to better your life. And I think in a lot of ways, financial health and literacy is a lot like health or physical health literacy. And I think that in the same way that when you get a diagnosis, you finally get your act together. I think it's the same thing when it comes to money, and especially for women. It's like when women get divorced or their husband dies is oftentimes the time that they get their financial life together because they don't have another choice.
Yeah. What was the moment for you?
Well, I was completely clueless. My boyfriend in high school said he wanted to be a hedge fund manager. I thought he wanted to be in gardening. He dumped me because I couldn't hang out with his Wall Street friends. Fast forward, his Wall Street friends want to hang out. But
hilarious.
I lied to get a job. So when I was 18, I started in TV. And as you know, you go to these small markets or whatever. And so I stalked this station chief in Chicago. I went to Northwestern and wanted to work in like what I thought was big market Milwaukee. And
I love Milwaukee. It's where my baby was born.
Yeah. And I thought that was like the end all be all for me and my career. And the guy was like, no, first of all, you also don't know geography. You can't like go from Chicago to Milwaukee every day. I grew up in Los Angeles. And so he said, but we just started this business network. Do you know anything about business news? And I, like, my armpits are sweating even thinking about this moment. I said, absolutely. I love business news.
Stop it.
And so I totally lied. I lied to get my job and I figured it out. And what I realized, Maria, is that money is just language like anything else. We just don't have a Rosetta Stone for that language. So I started on the floor of the Chicago Merc, which I thought was a mall.
What's the Chicago Merc?
It's a stock exchange in Chicago. They do commodities there. So pork bellies and orange juice, which I didn't even realize you could
pork
trade.
Bellies and orange juice are not food?
They're also food, but you can also sell futures on them too.
Oh.
Yeah.
What does that mean,
trading.
sell futures on them?
So those are options that you can have for different kinds of investments. So like you'll have stocks, bonds, commodities, which could include metals and like gold or silver or oil. And then you have all this weird other stuff like soybeans. And I thought I was getting punked. When I first heard this, by the way, I was like, is this a joke?
That's funny. I've really done a lot of homework in the money sector. Never knew I could invest in soybeans. I knew I could invest in gold.
You're today years old.
Wow. Okay, soybeans and pork rinds?
Pork bellies.
I mean, come on. Okay, so what does that look like and why?
So those are advanced. So I would say when you're doing first time investing, like you don't want to start with investing in like futures of orange juice, which by the way, like are a big deal for farmers, right? Because if you have a storm, you want to sort of hedge what the price is. But it's one part of an overall well-balanced, healthy portfolio that you can have once you start investing. But I was so scared to start investing to begin with. Like I knew what compound interest was because I got into a boatload of credit card debt. Like I didn't have a credit card growing up. And once I finally got one, like I went out of control. I got my first big job at CNN and like I got clothes and stuff and
had to.
I was like, okay, here I am. And I used cash under the sink, which I still had because I was like my parents' daughter, and racked up credit card debt, which is so stupid in hindsight, but I didn't know. Like we don't learn this stuff in school.
That's funny when you talk about I knew what compound interest was. I think that people don't know what compound interest is in the opposite way. We realize it on our credit cards. Like I remember when I had credit cards in college and I was like, oh my God, this is like double the amount of what the bill is I'm paying in interest. That's crazy, but we don't realize that we could be making money like that too.
That's when it all changed for me. When I was like, this is the force that's used against us in the financial system, but you can use that very same force in your favor to make your money work for you. In the same way that it snowballs out of control against you, you have to take that power back and use it in your favor.
Yeah. So you ended up on the Merc floor.
Yeah, I was like picked up and moved. It was like full Wolf of Wall Street style. You couldn't wear like heels higher than like kitten heels. It was like your skirt had to be a certain length. I was like one of 3 women on the floor of the exchange at the time.
Wow. And then you just kind of figured it out. I think that's one of the things I see and I hear about all the time. And when I interview women, it's men have no problem bullshitting their way up. And women are so scared if they don't know everything, they won't go for it. And so even though you fibbed to get there, you figured it out. It's like, it's not, sometimes you have to just throw yourself in and say, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I figured out harder things in life, right? Like and I say this not to brag, but to say how messed up the education system is. I was a valedictorian of my high school and my college, and I still didn't learn any of this stuff. Right?
Northwestern, hey now.
I mean, that and like 550 gets me a almond milk latte. So like it means nothing. But we didn't learn like basic financial literacy, how to do a business plan, how to do our taxes, how to make a budget. We learned the Pythagorean theorem, like why.
Yeah. And why do we need the Pythagorean theorem?
For zero reasons.
Unbelievable.
Whatsoever. Like how to dissect a frog. I can't believe I even did that when
I was really good at it.
I don't know what that says.
But again, you're right.
Yeah, like when the train goes from here to there and like put it in, Google Maps or whatever. And so it's so crazy that we don't learn this stuff. And for a lot of us, our parents don't talk to us about it. And so I think moving forward, you can bury your head in the sand and say, well, like, I didn't learn it and that sucks. But that's only hurting yourself moving forward. And so, I've done a lot of emotional, mental health work on myself. And I think a lot of the same principles apply to finances. I like to forgive my former self for what she didn't know and say, baby Nicole, it's okay. It's okay that your parents were messed up, you grew up in a messed up place and like had to lie to get your first job. But moving forward, it's not okay. Like you have the tools now. And so I think it's a combination of forgiveness and tough love.
I love that. All right. So Heal Squad, we're going to forgive ourselves for what we didn't know before. And whatever financial situation you're in right now, there's always a way. And I'll tell you, what makes me so sad is when I watch people who actually do pretty well, they don't know how to now translate that so they can make money when they're sleeping. I mean, even just as simple as treasury bills. And right now, treasury bills are yielding good returns. And so you could be making money off your money while you're sleeping, like 5-ish%. It's a good percent. I mean, if you're putting it in the S&P 500, you might get up to 8% return, right? I don't know where we're at now, but usually 8 to 10
adjusted over time.
So if you're really scared, the treasuries are usually the safest thing.
For sure. So treasury bills are basically bonds issued by the government. And so you are on the other side of debt for that in the same way as like CDs, right? And so you can use debt in your favor as well. And so when we think of debt, we think as it's a bad thing. And it can be if you're in a boatload of credit card debt. But when you are the bank, essentially, it's awesome because you're lending the government money to go do whatever. You can invest in municipal bonds for states, cities to do roads and bridges or whatever. And in turn, they give you the yield or interest for using your money to do all of that stuff. The government does the same thing. You can invest in corporate bonds too. So basically you're the issuer and you get the benefit of that interest. But yeah, you work so hard for your money. I think it's time it returned the favor.
Yeah, because if you leave it in the bank, you might get 1/4%, right? Not even.
You're actually losing money that way because if over time inflation is growing at 3%, I mean, we had like cuckoo banana stuff during the pandemic, right? And that was not normal. Like over time it's 3%. But if you're making 1/4%, you're actually losing your purchasing power.
See, but that's really hard to understand because if I've got $100 in the bank and that $100 is still there, it's hard for me to understand the concept of I lost money.
Because in the future, that $100 is not going to buy you the same amount of things as the $100 is going to buy you today, right? It's like why movie tickets were, $5 when we were growing up? And now they're 20? That's the same force. And so when you think about inflation eating into your purchasing power, like that $100 is not going to go as far.
It's not worth the same.
It's not worth the same. And so if you're not making at least 3% on your money, you're actually losing money.
So when I took everything out during the pandemic, at some point I go, this isn't going to go well. And I am not going to lose.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I took everything out of the market.
Why?
I was so sick to my stomach over what was happening and I got really nervous. I'm like, this is blood money. I'm not doing this. And I ripped it all out.
Maria, no.
I did. And I had, I'll tell you, I had balls and I doubled down and invested more when the markets were at a low. So I earned more. And then that August, I was like, yeah, I don't like this. And I've worked too hard for this. I have elderly parents who are sick. And I was like, I can't have something just wipe this out. I just didn't have a good feeling of where things were going. So I took it out. I lost so much probably over time, like you said, until I put them back in the bonds, in the treasuries, where I started earning money back. But, it's investing's emotional. And if you have a good investor, a good fiduciary, and I've read Tony Robbins' Money Master the Game, where he taught me about the difference between a fiduciary and a broker.
Should we double click on that?
And I feel like we should double click on it because, and I want the Heal Squad to know, even the wealthiest people I know, and I mean half a billionaires to billionaires, didn't even know what a fiduciary was when I asked them. Like literally, Nicole, they didn't know. So explain that.
I mean, I have girlfriends too that just sold their companies for, 9 figures and have it all in a Bank of America checking account too. So at every level, there is room to grow. But a fiduciary is really important to understand the difference between a fiduciary and a stockbroker. And they can be called different things. In Miss Independent, I go through a stockbroker by other names means the same thing.
There you go, friends. Miss Independent right here.
Like a vice president of blah-de-blah is just, a euphemism for a stockbroker. And so there's a stockbroker and a fiduciary, which is working in your best interest. So it would be the same as a stylist that you're working with versus a salesperson at Bloomies or Saks. And so they're working on commission. So they're incentivized to sell you that jacket because they're making money. A stylist, you're paying a flat fee. And so they just want you to look awesome no matter where it's from, doesn't matter. So that would be the same as a fiduciary. It would be, and Tony says in his book, it would be like a dietitian versus a butcher. A butcher wants to sell you the meat and the dietitian is working in your best interest. So fiduciary is somebody that you're going to pay a flat fee to that's going to work for your best interest versus a broker that's only going to sell you stuff and talk their book, which is like Wall Street talk for just saying sell you their own stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, the best way I understood it too was, I started to understand it when we uncovered some of the things that I had bought. And it was like, mutual fund A, mutual fund B, mutual fund C. And you're like, well, what's the difference? It's all mutual fund Nicole, but there's an A, B, and C. And it's like, oh, what the broker's charging you behind the scenes. Mutual fund Nicole A charged 0.5%. Mutual fund Nicole B charged 2%. And then mutual fund Nicole C charged 3%. Now I'm upside down on this investment because I'm paying the broker so much. And then the stock went down, let's say. And so I was like, oh my God, they can just pick which one. And you're like, holy shit. But a fiduciary, and usually they take a very teeny percentage.
2% is a lot, by the way. You think that 2% doesn't. It's a lot when it comes to fees.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're called loads, which is just a different word for fees. And that's the thing, like money is a language, like anything else. And when you don't speak the language, you're really confused. It's like if I went to Japan, we didn't speak Japanese, we'd be really confused.
Yeah.
If you go to Wall Street and you don't speak this language, you'll be confused until you speak it. And then you're like, duh, that was so easy. Why didn't I not realize a load is just more fees? But fees will get you. And that is one of the big reasons that having a fiduciary in your corner is the most important, because they're looking out for those fees. They will eat into your wealth over time more than anything else.
Yeah, they have a fiducial responsibility to do what's in your best interest, not JP Morgan's, not Charles Schwab's, not Bank of America's. So your first thing, Heal Squad, as you're venturing out into investing, is you need a fiduciary. And by the way, you'll get tricked because there are co-people. There's fiduciary slash brokers, right? You want a straight up fiduciary. You want no broker. Now, what is the best advice you have on how to ask that and feel safe that you got the right person?
I have a script actually in there of how to talk to them. And I do a lot of scripts in my books or in my show because I think that we know in theory we should be having these conversations, but when we start, we're like, wait, what do I say? And so I think just following some of that, asking the right questions around whether or not they're an RIA, which is a registered investment advisor, a couple of the other things that you should stick to when you're having those initial conversations, like what the fees are going to be.
Is an RIA good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a fiduciary.
I haven't heard that one, so.
Yeah. There's so many, that's the thing.
The language grows.
It's the language, like in Wall Street ease. It's short is not the opposite of tall. It's the opposite of long. And it just means something's like going in the pooper. It's not complicated once you realize it.
Yeah, but I like how you explain it, that it's a language, because I've never thought about it like that, and it really is.
It totally is. And I think that that's what keeps people out of this conversation. And I think what you mentioned, that, you know, men talk about it more. It's not that they know more. It's not that they can do this stuff easier. It's like they went to a Holiday Inn Express once and bought one bond, and now they're like an investment expert, and we're sitting here like doing mutual funds and we're like, we don't know anything. No, we need to change that conversation with ourselves first. It's the mean girl inside our heads often that stands in our way the most.
Yeah. So how do you look at financial self-care?
Well, first of all, the things that stand in people's way, not only at the jargon, are three things usually. It's that I don't know math, so I can't do it. Like, I started as a poetry major, so if I could figure this out, anyone could do it, truly. The math a fifth grader can do to get your financial life together. It's the humanities, it's the emotional part, it's how to get your friend to pay you back, it's how to talk to your significant other about money, it's how to have a prenup discussion. It's all that stuff that is really what stands in your way. It's not the math, that's just an excuse. And then the next excuse is, I don't have enough money. And you don't need a lot of money to start. You need the most time possible, which allows you to have your money work for you while you're sleeping. And then the third is that I'm too old, right? And so people say, like, I'm too old, I can't start. Well, the truth is, like, you're never as young as you are today. So as far as I'm concerned, today is as good a day as any.
I love that. So let's just talk about somebody, they have $1,000 in the bank. What's the best thing they could do with it right now?
Well, it depends on the whole picture, right?
And again, like we said, the emotional, like, can you live without this money for how long, right? Like even your bonds, you know, are you securing them for 3 months, 6 months? How long are you securing them for? Because you can't touch that money, well, usually without penalties.
That's right. That's right. In the same way as CDs. And you want your money to work for you, but you want to make sure that your holistic picture is in order. So if you have a ton of credit card debt, then I would take that $1,000 and pay off that credit card debt, because credit card debt is going to accrue at around 20%. So if you're
Is it 20% now?
Well, it depends on your credit score, right? So not everyone has the same APR on their credit card. It's all contingent on what your credit score is, and so, like your financial report card. So it works like a seesaw. The higher your credit score is, the lower your interest rates are. And so, you know, in relationships, in life, it's the little things that matter. In finances, it's the big things that matter. Like the stuff about cutting out the latte and all that BS is so silly. It drives me crazy. And it was part of why I went into this and wrote the books and all the things and stopped talking to old rich white men about money and wanted to talk to my former self, because it's like, no, cutting out the latte or the avocado toast is like not going to make you rich. It's focusing on your credit score so you get lower interest rates. It's focusing on the big things in finance. So if you have a bunch of high yielding credit card debt, I would put that $1,000 toward that. If you don't, if everything else is in order, if you have an emergency fund in place, you want an emergency fund that's like 3 to 6 months of bare bone expenses. Like I call it the brown rice and beans diet. It's not all the fancy stuff, but what you need to live on if, God forbid, something happened to your job or you got sick or somebody in your family got sick. And so you want that in liquid, and that just means like something that's really accessible. So you can't go to the grocery store with your mortgage or your 401k. You need like something that's
Can't
accessible.
pay rent like that either.
No. But if everything else is in order, and it depends on your age too, and it depends on your timeline. So traditionally, like the asset allocation, that's like the rule of thumb is your age in bonds. So if you're 25, then you should have 25% of the money that you're investing in bonds, and then the rest of that in equities or stocks, so 75%. And the thinking behind that is the older you are, the more conservative you want to be, because you don't want to, you know, like when you're in your 60s, it's not time to like go mess around with crypto, right? You want it to be steady and there for you when you need it. So if you were in your 30s, like I would put pretty much all of that money in S&P 500 index funds. And what is that? First of all, what is an index? So when you hear on the news, like the Dow is up or the S&P is up or down or the NASDAQ is up or down, those are indexes. And so an index fund tracks what those indexes are doing. And so it's a diversified investment that you can have in one purchase versus buying like a little piece of all of the S&P 500, which are 500 of the biggest stocks, then you buy one thing, and if one of those stocks goes up, you're still propped up by the entire index over time. And that's what, experts or Tony Robbins or, other financial books will tell you over time will yield you about 10% inflation adjusted. But over time, like there are definitely years.
Yeah, because you go up and down.
For sure. Like put your blinders on, like you're looking at a chart. And by the way, you can look at charts in different areas and see different things and make up different stories. But when you zoom out, that's what you're seeing, where you're seeing that growth. But like in 2008, during the financial crisis, you weren't seeing that, of course.
Yeah. So basically, guys, like you could buy Starbucks, you could buy Dunkin' Donuts, you could buy Lululemon, you could buy these individually, but there's so much more volatility to owning individuals. Whereas, I mean, if you buy big, great stocks, like they're usually going to be fine. But the S&P 500 has all of the ones I mentioned, let's say, and then some. So now if one company has hardship, the other one's doing really well, it balances out and it makes it a more secure fund. And the S&P 500 has outperformed anything over time, always, right?
Always. Like all fund managers who say and gloat about themselves and say they can beat the market, they don't. Nobody beats the market. So just go with the market. And by the way, if one of those stocks in the S&P 500 doesn't perform really well, they get kicked out of the index.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
So it's
interesting.
It's kind of self-policing in that way.
So Heal Squad wants to forget their past and start, this new financial plan for the future. They go to any one of their banks that they go to, whether it's Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Schwab, wherever they bank, and they ask to meet with a fiduciary, right?
So there's a difference between banks and brokerages. So banks is where you're going to have your checking account and your savings account and where you can buy CDs. Brokerages are where you can buy stocks. And recently I had somebody on the show on Money Rehab saying that they went to the Apple store to buy Apple stock. Now, if you don't...
They sell stock?
They do not sell stock. But if you didn't know where to buy stock, like that's what you might think. And that's okay, right? We're doing forgiveness of our former self. But where you buy Apple stock is through a brokerage. So brokerage would be like Schwab,
JP Morgan.
Yeah, exactly.
But doesn't Bank of America and Wells Fargo, don't they have brokerage accounts too?
So Bank of America has Merrill Lynch, which is their like investment arm of Bank of America. But you can't buy stocks through like the Bank of America app, for instance, but you can have your savings account there. So
you would go in to one of those institutions, set up an account.
Or you could do it yourself. I mean, really,
That's scary though.
It's so scary. And at the end of the day though, nobody's going to care more about your money than you are. And so yes, having an advisor would be awesome if you feel like you're at the point to do that. If you're just starting to, you could think of it as a personal trainer, and you could get the moves and then you could like replicate the moves on your own too.
Okay. Is there a thing, and I'm sure there is, because I was saying the other day, I'm like, we've been spending a lot on like renovations and things around the house. I'm like, that money somehow is there. I could have been technically saving it, let's say, right? And I was like, I feel like once this is done, I'm just going to get an app where I can just be doing it myself and throwing it in myself and being like, okay, I'm going to send, $100 in today because I just feel like it. Because I would have spent, my theory was I would have spent $100 on this item, but I'm not going to, and I'm going to put it in here. I feel like there's something to, even for people, I know the lattes aren't going to save you or whatever, but once they have all that stuff in place, psychologically, if you could say, you know what, I'm passing on that today and I'm going to put that money in here. And if I do that enough and I become habitual with the idea of investing in my future rather than a material I want now, I think that could be something that would work.
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I didn't have money to get what like the popular girls had, was this Tiffany bracelet with the dangling thing. And I had always wanted this. And there was a mean girl who bullied me at school. And I just remember like still to this day, you know, you and I have interviewed all the people and met all the people, and like this one girl, I remember everything about her. I barely remember what I ate for breakfast, but when I started on CNBC, I got a note from her, and my heart sank. I was like, you know, interviewing CEOs and politicians and all the things, but this girl who like hurt me when I was growing up, I had such a visceral reaction. And I remember thinking, she asked me for help because, you know, they always come around that way. And I jumped in a cab in New York, and I talk about this in one of my books, I don't remember which, but I went to the Tiffany store. And I was like, now that I've made money, I'm finally gonna buy this freaking bracelet. And like, I'm gonna come full circle to it. And I went and I saw like the sterling silver section, and I was like, finally, I'm gonna get this little dangling bracelet. And like, I win. And I'm about to buy it. And at this point, I can buy whatever I want, which like, you know, I earned it and felt great about it. And I think that when we work really hard for things, like that's great to reward yourself. And I left. And instead, I bought Tiffany stock. And
yes, queen. Yeah, I love that. See, that's what I'm saying.
And Tiffany stock grew more than all the bracelets. Like with that stock, I could buy bracelets on my entire arm. I could buy bracelets for the entire Heal Squad team. And those are the choices, that you have to think about. If you can buy an iPhone, you can buy stock. Apple stock is much less than an iPhone. You can buy a couple of Apple shares with the amount that you would buy an iPhone with. And so when you talk about putting money in consistent intervals, that's really important because that automates the process. And that helps you with a lot of financial anxiety or the financial trauma. And we all have financial trauma. And so when you do it, it's called dollar cost averaging, which is by putting little bits of money in consistent times, you kind of account for the fluctuations in the market, because the adage is buy low, sell high. So ideally during the pandemic, you would have bought more, not sold, which is fine.
I did. I had balls. Okay. I did. And then I lost my balls.
It's okay. It's okay. The thing is, we've never not recovered from a single recession or depression in U.S. history.
I know, but this was unlike anything ever. And you see what happened. I think it was in Canada. They froze everyone's bank accounts. And I know in Greece, when they had their financial crisis, they said, like, they wiped everybody out. And they're like, okay, this is all you can take out. And I was like, no, not happening. Like, I'd rather, whatever.
I get it. Greece, like being from the pigs countries, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, or, people whose families are from Argentina, like saw, their currency basically amount to nothing. Like there's serious trauma. There's generational trauma we have around finances. There's, macro and micro trauma that we have. We have it around our families too. Like I remember bailing my mother out of jail with cash in the safe under the sink behind the maxi pads when I was in middle school. And I remember my house foreclosed on. Like I had serious financial traumas. Like I had to turn the lights off when I left a room to save money on electricity, or not flush the toilet unless it was number 2. And these are like real traumas that stay with me as like even me to this day. One of my biggest indulgences and luxuries is leaving all the lights on all the time. And it's not
I still shut them all off. Now it's for new reasons, but before it was for financial reasons too. Yeah.
But we all have our thing. Or our friend group, if our friends get into a bunch of debt, or they hide purchases from their significant others, or, the macro stuff that we've all dealt with, the pandemic, the housing crisis, the dot-com bubble. And so I think we have financial traumas, all of us, in one way or another. And so it's confronting what those are, and then setting up that system is really the way to combat it, right? Setting up that automatic system where you're dollar cost averaging, so you're accounting for those fluctuations, which just basically means if you had $12,000, instead of putting $12,000 in the market right now, because you don't know if you're going to buy at a high or buy at a low,
you average in, they say.
That's right. So like you would buy in $1,000 a month, and so over time you're basically getting what that would be, so you're not chancing it on one particular day.
Yeah. So okay. So
I know I got real heavy for a second.
No, it's and I think that's really important for people to know, because you have to know you can overcome them, or you can work with them and despite them, because we had hardships. I mean, my dad, when he lost his main job, my uncle would leave groceries at the door because we didn't have money for food. And I used to watch them always fight about money. And anytime, the only thing I ever heard was, we don't have money. We don't have the money. We don't have the money. So in my adult life, even making an incredible amount of money, I've always thought, I don't have money.
Yeah.
And I've acted as if I don't have money. And it's been my husband forcing me to go buy the car or treat myself. Like, he's like, Marie, you're not even enjoying, you're working so hard, you're not enjoying any of it. I was squirreling it all away. And you do have to enjoy some of it. You have to. And P.S., that's actually a great transition because I have to talk about our biggest supporter who helps us keep these lights on in that way. And that is Macy's. Friend, spring is upon us. And I am wearing one of my favorite new spring purchases from Macy's when I went shopping recently. I really thought this was kind of like a fun spring jacket. I have it with jeans, and you can do it with all kinds of things, and different color jeans too. Dark, light. But I know putting a new wardrobe together could be daunting. They do have their free stylist program. I don't know if you know this, but they do. They have a free stylist program, Nicole. So you can go, they can set you up with whatever you need, whether you're complementing your wardrobe or creating a new one, or you're going, somewhere and you need a little bit of help. Check out their free stylist program. And also you can go to my curated list at Macys.com/Heal Squad, and you can get yourself a little something nice because we do deserve to feel great. And sometimes it's about investing in yourself, and your appearance is, whether we like it or not, important.
Yeah.
So.
Did stylists know that they're the fiduciaries of the fashion world?
I mean, I don't think they did. That was a really great analogy. I was like, oh my God, that's such a cool way to think about it. So the S&P 500 is where people could start. My financial advisor has always talked about the Vanguard accounts. Do you know much about the Vanguard accounts? I'm sure.
So Vanguard and Fidelity are brokerages, and so they're going to have their own like S&P 500 index fund that would be mutual funds, and you can only buy into those if you're a Vanguard customer. So those would be the difference. The only difference between that and like Fidelity's version of that or Schwab's version of that is the fees, and you want to keep them to like probably 0.0 something percent, like in that range. Like it should be that small.
So which S&P 500 index is the best right now?
Whichever one has the lowest fees, and they fluctuate. But if you're not a customer of some of those brokerages, you can't buy into the mutual funds that are the index funds. So index funds can either be ETFs. So those are exchange traded funds, and you can buy and sell those like stocks. Like you can go into an app, if you're like, instead of buying $100, faucet or whatever, I wish faucets were $100, but like something for the house, then I'm going to buy, $100 of S&P 500 index fund. You can buy in the middle of the day an ETF. You can buy once a day mutual funds. Mutual funds have a little bit higher fees.
Go slow on that again. Once a day you can buy index funds?
Mutual funds. Index funds, like think of index funds as the main category, and within index funds there's two branches. There's ETFs, exchange traded funds, which would be like SPY or VOO. If you go onto your app, you can't just type in index fund. Some people think they can do that. You'll need a specific ticker, which is like the address for that stock. So SPY is one example. Of course, do your own research.
Of an index.
Of an index fund that's an ETF, or VOO, for instance, is a big popular one. And then you can have also mutual funds. So
the mutual funds are what
tickers.
That bank has created a bucket, and those never perform as well as the S&P 500.
So there are different kinds of mutual funds within that category. There are the index funds that track pretty closely the performance of the index that they're following, so the S&P, but then there are other like weird varieties of like what they say are overall portfolios, and those are the ones that usually don't perform as well as the overall market.
Got it. So for the Heal Squad member who is wanting to do this, just to make it easy, they're going to go to, let's say, Charles Schwab or JP Morgan, and they're going to say, I want to start investing in the S&P 500, and it's going to be an ETF, and it's going to be one of those two, the SVO, what is it?
SPY is one of them. Like, of course, see, what makes most sense for you. But if you open the app, like you type in the search bar, like SPY, you'll get that ETF as something you could buy. VOO is another one.
And you're looking to see which one has the best interest rate there.
Fees primarily. You want to look at like a combination of how much they have in that fund, like how well capitalized it is,
how do you
what
do
their
that?
Performance is.
See, now this is where it's getting complicated, Nicole. Right?
How much time do we have, sister?
Well, I just want to make it easy for people to go in and just start. And totally. I remember when I started, because a friend of mine was making a ton of money and just blowing it at every designer store in LA. And I'm like, you need to save money. You're going to end up broke and whatever. So I opened up a Vanguard account for him. So you can open a Vanguard account if you're not a customer. You just open one.
Yeah, totally. You just can't get the mutual funds that are
until you invest in there.
Exactly. Yeah, but you can get the very same one in any brokerage. So like, okay, open up a Schwab account, put in money first, and then look up some of these index funds. QQQ tracks the NASDAQ, which is tech heavy. You'll probably want to look at like the 52-week average. So over a year, where is it? If it's at the high of the 52-week average, you're probably buying in when it's too high. You'll like to try to buy where it's lower.
So what are those numbers we're looking for? So you're looking at the 52-week high. And what is the number that would indicate that it's too high for you and you should go to another one?
Well, I don't know if it's go to another one. I think it's trying to commit to the idea of dollar cost averaging. And so depending on where it is, like it could be high this month, it could be low next month. So you kind of want to put
putting it in.
Yeah, you want to put like a little bit in at that time. So if you're committing today, Heal Squad, if you're saying like, I'm going to put $100 a month in at the whatever day we are right now on the 5th of the month, every single month regardless of where it is. And so you want to have that discipline. That's also why I like AI around finances a lot too, because it takes some of this emotion out of it, which is what we're going to see a lot more of, because that's what stands in our way. It's so you're like, what if I lose everything? And trust me, from someone who's experienced a ton of financial trauma too, I don't want to lose any of my money.
Nothing.
Nothing, none of it. But at the same time, remember when we first started talking, you are losing money by doing what you think is the right thing. So talk to us about compounding. So you talked about opening the account, committing to every 5th of the month, whatever day you want. Or you can set it automatically.
So it'll just pull from the accounts. I like that. Set it and forget it. Every 5th of the month, $100 is going to go in. Why is it important that that is consistent?
Okay, so let's say you put $100 in a brokerage that tracks it in a brokerage inside an ETF that tracks the S&P 500. When you're 25, let's say you start that, by the time you retire, you're going to have $350,000 by the way compound interest works, because your money makes money on top of that money.
So over 30 years, 40 years?
Over 40 years.
Over 40 years, how much money did you say?
Sorry. If you start when you're 25, you'll have $1 million by the time you retire. If you start when you're 35, thank you. If you start when you're 35, you'll have about $350,000. Now, that's only a $12,000 difference. So if you put $100 a month, every single month, if you're missing 10 years of that compounding, you're going to miss hundreds of thousands of dollars in the way that compound interest works by just starting 10 years later, still just contributing $100 a month. We're not talking about a lot of money. That's why it's the time that matters most. It's not actually the money that
and
you
consistency.
Put in, and the consistency.
So explain to everybody. So say there's someone listening right now, they're 50 years old and they're like, okay, I'm not 25. What can I do that like could be exciting for me right now with compounding?
So I think anything that compounds should be really exciting, and you'll see it grow, and that's what gets that's originally when I started investing what got me excited, because I was like, damn, I'm not doing anything and my money is working for me because I worked so hard for it. So, if you have a 401k through your employer, or if you have an IRA, which is an individual retirement account, whether it's a Roth or traditional, you're already investing. So like, surprise, if you've put that money to work, one of the biggest things I see people do is fund those accounts, but not actually find those investments within the account. So it's just sitting there. That's a huge mistake.
I think that's what we might be doing, actually.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
Can I look at it after?
Yeah. I think we might be doing that.
You have
to take your IRA and decide what.
Right. So if you put $7,000 a year,
because I put my max contribution every year.
You have to tell it what to do. You can't just leave it in the account, and that's often what happens to people, and it breaks my heart.
I've been doing it for 20 years. Can you imagine? What a mistake. I think that's how it's been. I don't know.
Okay. It's gonna be okay.
I'm making notes, Heal Squad. Even me, who's read so much about this, you have so much to learn.
There's always more to learn. And by the way, like that language analogy, the language continuously changes. Crypto, NFTs, I snuck into my last book in the last minute because like the language still changes once you learn the baseline. But yeah, you have to put that money to work. But if you are invested in a 401k through work, you're investing in the market. So that's compound interest. And
but you have to do the same thing there? Tell it what to do?
You have to allocate what the money, what to do with the money.
Maybe we did. I can't imagine AJ wouldn't have done that for me. Yeah. Anyway,
we're going to track.
Okay.
And I think having an advisor is amazing too, but knowing that you can step in and knowing where all of that stuff is really important too. And being able to, have those conversations and advocate for yourself, because they know a lot too. But even if you saw, in Tony's book, he talked really eloquently about this idea that like the shoemaker walks barefoot in the financial world, where even a lot of financial advisors don't have their own financial what together.
Yeah.
And so don't just assume that this person knows more than you. Like, you are smart, you have figured out harder things. And so staying on top of it, even if you aren't managing the day-to-day, like knowing what is happening is so important. It's just like advocating for your health.
Yeah.
Right? Like you God forbid, if you have a diagnosis, and going to doctors is a full-time job, and like staying on top of all the appointments and knowing the latest research.
Well, and I think that's what happened to me, because I started doing all this financial stuff right before my mom got sick. So I made massive changes that yielded me so much freedom. Thank God, because of Tony's book, just before my mom got sick. And then from there, it's just been one sickness after another that we had to deal with. So my attention had to shift to save lives and my own. So Heal Squad, even I am going to have to go back in and clean some stuff up. And I've known that I have to make some adjustments. Even like I have a living trust. I have to make adjustments for my daughter now.
Yeah.
So we're going to go in.
And a will and an advance directive and all that stuff. Which is another thing where when you're getting together with somebody, those are conversations that you have to have in relationships, right? Because the financial talks just get more advanced as life happens and as you have kids.
Yeah.
Wills and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, we've had to do all of it. And advance directives are really, really important in terms of your health and stuff. So I had done them very early on with my mom and dad, so that it was very clear who was going to be in charge of their health care, so that an emergency didn't happen and then we're in the hospital and it's a fight. Luckily, when that moment did happen, because unfortunately it did, there was no fight because my mom had already put me in charge. Side note on that. But I want to go back to, because I want in this episode everyone to make sure they know what they're doing. So they're going to go, they're going to set up, and whether it's on the app or they're going to go and get guidance. I always feel like people need the little cushion of help. It's a little scary to do on your own.
You can go to the CFP website as a good place to start.
What's
Certified
that?
Financial Planners.
Oh, okay.
It's just
and they're fiduciaries.
Directory. Yeah.
Beautiful. So CFP.com. I love that. CFP.com.
I think it might be org. I'm not sure, but the CFP website.
Okay. You're going to find somebody to help you, and then you're going to get in the index, And if you fund the account, you set it and forget it so that every month it's taking. And if you can, guys, listen, $20 yields you like $320,000, I think, over was it 40-year span?
It depends on like what you're invested in and yeah, but over time.
Because the $100 gets you, so $100 over 40 years gets you 2.2 million. Because I remember doing the math, if the index, if it was yielding around an 8% return, but you can never miss a payment. So will you explain very clearly for people how the compounding works? Like, how can I just put in $20 a week, or is it $20 a week? Yeah, $20 a week, and then end up with $320,000. And then if I did $100, was it a week or a month? Shit, now I'm getting it all confused.
The example I gave you was $100 a month.
Yeah.
So relatively the same, $20 a week, $100 a month. Like you're growing your money on top of itself. So it's not a simple interest calculation. So if I told you you're going to make, 10% on $100, right? That would be $10. And so a compound calculation would be, okay, the first year you're going to make $10, but the second year you're going to make 10% off $110. So that's how it continues to grow. So 10% of $110, is $11, and then you add the $11 into onto the $110. This is like a poetry major,
yeah.
Right? And so on top of that, then that is going to make 10%.
Yeah.
So you're constantly like
it's
growing.
A ladder. It keeps growing faster and faster and faster. So, Tony gives an example of a U.S. Post Office worker who, made a very meager kind of salary back in the 20s. And his friend said, imagine if I put a 10% tax on you every year. He's like, you'd have to pay it. You'd have to find a way. So he made him start investing that money, and the compounding, he ended up like a millionaire, multimillionaire by the time he was retired because of it. And so you have to think about compounding and how that can work for you in such a great way. And you can do it with kids too. All right, friends. We're going to leave that right there, and we're going to break this up and come back for part 2 tomorrow, where we're going to talk about how to help set your kids up for financial success and how we're going to make little Athena a millionaire. All right. Be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.